Hello, hello, hello out there. Nicole Roberts Jones here, and welcome to Bankroll Your Brilliance Thursdays, a weekly time for you and I to chat, where I give you tools, tips, and strategies to get paid for what you know. So this week, I'm actually pre-recording our episode because I am in the middle of my 2-day intensive where I coach women to start or grow their businesses. But I want you to know, even times when I can't be here live, I am always committed to be here every Thursday at 12 p.m. EST in 30 minutes or less to give you the tools and tips you need. So today is what I call Hot Seat Thursdays. And it's an opportunity where I answer your questions, right? And so I'm going to encourage you to send in your questions. You see it scrolling down at the bottom of your screen. Send in your questions to byb@blackdoctor.org. And again, our conversations are around three different areas. One, really understanding your authority, staying in the full power of your brilliance. Second is understanding your value. So, how do you get paid for it? How do you really look at work life balance? How do you add extra time in your days to be able to do it? For my mommies out there, how do you let go of mommy guilt? Any of that. And then, of course, third is how to create multiple streams of income from what you know. So today's conversation actually came from a question posted by Tony Jones. Yay. Thank you, Tony, for asking a question. Here's her question. So Tony wants to get started as a motivational speaker. She said, I've been in finance all my career life, and I'm now 50 years old. And guess what? I'm 51. So I'm right in front of you, right? She said, I really find joy and gladness in motivating individuals to reach for their goals and in life. And so, with that said, the thing that I really want to ask you first, Tony, is do you want to be a speaker or do you want to have a speaking business? See, it's a huge difference because can I tell you that people will need more than a 45-minute or 60-minute workshop with you? And it's really irresponsible. And yeah, I'm going all the way in. It's irresponsible for you not to have another way for them to work with you outside of that 45 to 60 minutes. So, what do I mean by that? So, let me tell you, I've been doing this 28 years and I learned this lesson at a time in my own business where I looked really, really successful. So, I started this in 1993. By some 2010, some 17 years in, my business looked really, really successful. So back then, I had a nonprofit and a for profit. So in my nonprofit, working with African American teenage girls, I had 10 chapters in 10 cities, and we were growing by leaps and bounds all over the country. In my for profit coaching women, and sorry, fellas, I have 95% of my clients are women, but I do still work with a few good men. So in my for-profit coaching practice, working with women like many of you to start or grow your businesses, I had an 100% maxed out coaching client roster, meaning I couldn't take another client. Sorry. So in 2010, I wrote my first book. So that book, by the way, behind me is my fourth book. So my book came out in 2010. I started getting invitations to speak all over the country. So every weekend I was either speaking at an entrepreneurial symposium, can't even get it out, a women's empowerment event, and I loved every minute of it. But Tony, I want you to get this. I was doing all of that. And my business was only generating $13,000 a year. So I pretty much had big community service, right? And so here's what I learned at that pivotal time for me in my business is I did not have a speaking business, right? I was speaking all over the country, but they weren't paying me. I didn't know how to monetize my message. And so during our time together, I'm going to give you the 3 steps to monetize your message. But let me tell you what I learned in that pivotal moment is that number one, well, the 3 things I'm going to walk you through are the 3 things I realized I didn't have. And so it didn't matter that people were coming up to me crying at the end of sessions. It didn't matter that people were coming up to me going, oh my God, what you said was life transforming. Listen, you can't serve from an empty cup. And because I was serving and serving and serving and serving, and you can see I wasn't making any money. So, of course, I had a daytime job. So, literally, I remember this like it was yesterday. It was November 7th of 2010. It was a weekend. I had just come home from another speaking event. And my daytime job, I was an adjunct professor. And I can't remember if I told you guys the story yet on one of my episodes, but it bears repeating. So, you understand the 3 steps I'm going to give you, Tony. So, my daytime job, I was an adjunct professor at Boston University at the time. And I hadn't looked at my syllabus. I hadn't created an outline to teach from. I hadn't read the books I had my students read, and I was done, tired, but knowing that this was my purpose. So to make an even longer story short, I hired a coach. And in my first coaching session, what my coach showed me was me. She said, Nicole, didn't you tell me that you're an adjunct professor? Didn't you tell me you have a consultant practice? Didn't you tell me? Didn't you tell me? Didn't you tell me? And what you teach is program development. See, what she began to show me is I didn't really have a business. It looked great. Back then, I would call myself Facebook famous and broke. But in order for me to really both have money, and for me, it's not necessarily having money, but you got to understand when you make more money, you create more meaning in this thing called life. You can serve more or be more. And so my problem was I didn't know how to do these three things. And these are the three things that are critical. So if you don't have a pen, y'all go grab one. Okay. So when I did these three things, my business went from 13,000 to over 200,000 in 6 months. And I've been growing by leaps and bounds since then. So that is why I'm passionate about what I teach. That is why I do these Bankroll Your Brilliance Thursdays. And that is why I really want you to get that it's bigger than just being a motivational speaker. It's bigger than just getting on the stage and talking for 45 minutes. You got to have a speaking business. And it takes three things. So if you see me looking down, this is my cheat sheet in front of me, right? So the first thing you've got to do is understand what is the need you are the answer to. So your brilliance is somebody's answer. So who is that? You're not everybody's answer. Says you want to be a motivational speaker. What is it that you want to speak about and for who? So the motivation does nothing. You get motivation free at church on Sunday. Empowerment, you get that free at church on Sunday. Inspiration, free at church on Sunday too. But what's the predictable result that you get people to, and are you the answer to help them get to it? So that's the first thing you've got to understand fully and completely is how are you the answer? How does your intellectual property speak to a group of people and help them move forward? Now, here's why I hear so many people mess up. I call it, you've heard this quote, being the jack of all trades, the master of none. So when you say I serve every woman, that's not real. By the way, that's what I used to say when I was making 13,000 in my business. So you've got to be clear the target market and the exact transformation. So if I use an example, it's like, when I buy a plane ticket to go to LA, if I'm buying a plane ticket, I'm not looking at anything but what time do I get to LA, period. I might look at how much it costs, but I want to know when do I get to LA. I'm not asking how long has a pilot had his license, how many seats are on the airplane. I'm not asking any of that. I'm really specific. Does this airline go to LA? Great, it does. What time? Period. That's all I want to know. But oftentimes we try to be everything to everybody, which means we're nothing to no one. So the first thing, Tony, you've got to get clear on is what is the transformation you provide and for who? And as laser specific as you can get on that, the best. And I didn't make a ticker for this. So this is part of what I talk about in my free book that I give you guys, my Bankroll Your Brilliance book. Let me see if I can make a ticker real quick. Look, Bankroll Your Brilliance book. Type it real quick, you guys. I mean, hope I spell it right. Type it fast, right? Now that yours wrong. But go get the Bankroll Your Brilliance book because I'm giving you these tips, free book. But it will go into a lot of what I'm sharing with you in more detail. Because again, it's more than the 45-minute message, okay? Or 60-minute, okay? So that's step number one. Step number two, you've got to differentiate yourself. See, yes, there are other people that do what you do, but nobody does it like you. So when you start getting clear on the transformation you provide and how do you do it the way you do it. So if you think about Beyonce, Beyonce and J-Lo, totally different, not comparable, right? Even if I said Beyonce and Janet Jackson, all three of them are performers. They all do it in their own way. You'll never see Beyonce trying to be like J-Lo. You'll never see J-Lo trying to be like Janet Jackson. Now, of course, they all probably may admire Janet Jackson because she was ahead of them, but they do it their own special way. So you've got to start to get clear on what is the transformation you provide and what's the way that you do it that nobody else does it like you. When I learned this for myself, I stopped trying to be the cookie cutter version of somebody else. I hate when people go, "Oh, you're the next Oprah." No, I'm the next Nicole Roberts Jones. Thank you. Right. See, because what happens is when you try to be like other people, now, don't get me wrong, success leaves clues. So yes, you can admire and you can aspire and you can learn some things from other people's success. But we try to be a cookie cutter version of someone else, you leave out the DNA that God placed in you. Now, anytime I say DNA, I'm talking distinct natural ability. And see, God gave you the gifts and talents that you have because He put you here on assignment. So you got to get clear on what that is and the way that you do it that is like nobody else. So if I use myself for an example, I was thinking about this earlier. I just put this over here. So my very first job I ever had was at BET. And I remember the summer of 1990 when I was still in college. I knew that I had to work at BET. It was my dream, but beyond all of that, I knew that I would outperform anybody else. And so I remember applying for the internship and not getting a call back. And I thought, well, what's weird? So then I called. I started calling, calling, calling. I finally get the woman on the phone and she's like, we're not taking interns. I said, but you haven't met me and I'm free. Why would you not at least meet me when I'm coming to you and I'm offering free work? So when I got in that interview, I outperformed her because I was me. I didn't try to be anybody else. I talked about how hard I work and all the things that I offered to the team. What I did was I went in that meeting and I was myself. And can I tell you that my first career was in the entertainment industry? Every job I ever got when I worked in entertainment, I never applied for. Never, never. You know why? Because I will outperform other people and be me. The same thing is true for me in my business. And by the way, when I was failing in my business, when I was making that 13,000, I wasn't standing in the full power of my DNA. I was doing what I saw other people doing in the industry instead of getting clear on who I be and how do I do me. And what I find is that oftentimes there are things that are intrinsic to your DNA that you don't realize that you do. Those things I call being in your blind spots. And so because it's in your blind spot, of course you don't realize you do it. And now I'm trying to get you to sell yourself, right? And because we've worked at a 9 to 5, however many years you've been in the industry, 20 years, 30 years, and this is not just for Tony, it's for all of you. Because you've been working building somebody else's $1 billion brand, when there's a $1 billion brand in you. See, when you've been building somebody else's $1 billion brand, it's easy for you to sell other people, but now you've got to sell yourself. And you don't even often realize what it is that you do. So you've got to take some time to get to know you. Now, I will tell you, it took me hiring that coach that I told you about. By the way, that coach cost me 30,000. I couldn't afford it, but I couldn't afford not to do it. But I'm gonna tell you that investing in myself shifted everything because it was because I invested that 30,000 that I made 200,000 that year. It was because I was willing to risk it all to gain it all that I made 200,000 that year. It was because I was willing to do the work to get clear on my DNA that not only did I make 200,000 that year, but I've been growing by leaps and bounds, working toward my $1 million year. Hello, somebody. So you've got to get clear on number one, how to package your brilliance, who you're the answer for, and how and what way you are different. How do you differentiate yourself in a crowded marketplace? So you've got to understand there are people that are assigned to you. What I mean by that is many of you, some of you have felt like, ooh, I resonate with you. Do you know why? Because you're assigned to me. Because there's something inside me, it's like a magnet, right? I often call it the lighthouse effect. Now, those of you that have ever seen a lighthouse, when you are in the dark of the night, what a lighthouse does is it shines a light on the shore so the boat can find its way back. And for many of you, what happens when you're shining your light, people feel like, ooh, well, that's that light pulling them to you. And so the same way that I might be doing that for some of you is the same way that you will do for other people when you get clear on what it is and you begin to stand in it confidently. This is that conversation I had with you a couple weeks ago around fierce. Think about when Beyonce made up Sasha Fierce. It was at a time in her business, in her career, where she was calling, she felt this inkling inside of her to grow and do something different, to expand her territory and go out solo. See, being comfortable would have been to stay in a group. But because she knew she had to up level her gift to do this thing, she made up Sasha Fierce, this alter ego, so that she could stand in the full power of who she was born to be. That's the same thing I'm inviting you into as we're having this conversation. The last thing, so package your brilliance into the answer a group of people need, stand out in a crowded marketplace is number two. How do you differentiate yourself from everybody else that does what you do? And the third thing you got to do is build multiple revenue streams. Listen, what most billionaires don't tell you is they have multiple revenue streams. So typically when I'm teaching this, I put up a slide, but this is more of a conversation you and I are having. But again, this is in the book, Bankroll Your Brains book. This is inside of your book. So grab your book, right? So that you get a real understanding. There's 15 ways that you can profit from your brilliance in that book. Okay. So listen, here's what I mean by this. So you've got to have multiple ways for people to say yes to you. Some people will want you one on one. Some people will want you in a group aspect. Some people will want online. Some people won't be able to afford you one way. And again, it's irresponsible for you not to have another way to work with them. And see, the options are endless when you have multiple revenue streams. Listen, I also, one of the things I love to talk about is making money while you sleep. So let me give you an example. A couple years ago, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I never usually travel this much. So Thanksgiving, my husband and I went to Rome, we went to Italy, and then we went to Barcelona. That was at Christmas. Excuse me, Thanksgiving. I came home from that trip, and then I had to travel to go to events in Denver and in Dallas. And then we went to Jamaica for Christmas. That was a good year, right? While I was gone that whole month, my business generated $87,000 in that month, and I wasn't present. So you have to have more than one way people can work with you. When you only have ways that you have to be present, you're capping off how much money you can make. Listen, when I was making that $13,000 in my business, can I tell you why? Number one, I only had 5 clients. So I only had the only revenue stream I had in my business was one-on-one coaching. And again, in the book, it shows you 15 revenue streams, and everybody's business is different. But I believe everybody should at least have 4 to 6. Because one, there's multiple ways people can work with you. And two, everybody may not be able to afford your one-on-one. And again, if you only have so many hours in a day, so I wasn't making any money because I was working. I was an adjunct professor. I, Grain papers is no joke, y'all. I couldn't take on more than 5 clients at a time. So that meant that my business could have never grown past that $13,000 point. It just wouldn't have ever. And just having an online program isn't enough because, by the way, I had an online program back then. So when you're not clear on the answer you are, that your gift is the answer that your gift is to who and how, it doesn't matter if you have an online program, it's not going to help anybody. Nobody's going to buy it. When you're not clear on how you're different and allowing yourself to stand out, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to hire you. You have to be able to articulate the predictable result that you create for people in what way. And then the last thing I will tell you, you've got to build visibility strategy, which again, I'll walk you through that book. Because it doesn't matter how phenomenal you are, how brilliant you are, if nobody knows you exist. So, Tony, I know that's a long answer. But to be a motivational speaker, you need more than just to be a speaker. You need to build a speaking business. Because one is irresponsible. People will need more than 45 minutes or 60 minutes with you. You can't really move anybody anywhere. You might get them excited, but you can't get them activated. You can't help them implement anything. And so what you do is leave them hanging when you only do a workshop. You've got to be able to give them an additional way to work with you. And how you do that are the 3 steps that I just walked you through. So, Tony, I hope that I answered your question. I know that was a long answer, but again, every now and then I will do these bankroll your brains, these hot seats is what I call them, right? And a hot seat is an opportunity for me to answer your questions. It's like putting you in a hot seat. Typically I will do these live. So if you have questions, I want to encourage you to send in your questions. Again, it's scrolling at the bottom of your screen. Go to BYB at BlackDoctor.org. I read every single email. Well, my assistant does, and she sends me an itemized overview. But I get every single one so that I can answer your questions live. Okay. Here's what I know. When we're in the middle of a pandemic, your brilliance is the one thing that never gets canceled. The one thing it never, ever will disappoint you if you do the work to grow it. And so our conversations every Thursday at 12 p.m. EST, I will give you tools and tips. I'll have guests on so we can talk about all the things that bump up against your brilliance so that 2021 can be your abundantly above all year. So, two things I want to ask you. If you are enjoying anything I'm sharing, please, number one, write a comment. Tell me value you're getting. I come back, I read every comment. That's number one. Number two, will you click below and share? Share this insight because other people will benefit from this. Listen, I want you to imagine what this world would be like if all of us stood in the full power of who we were born to be. If we really unapologetically served other people that need the gift inside of us, and then that abundance that comes back to us when we're serving in our DNA. Oh, see, see, we're meant to all live abundantly above all, but you've got to do the work to grow that brilliance that's inside of you. Again, my name is Nicole Roberts Jones. It's my honor to be here with you every Thursday, 12 p.m. EST. So tell a friend, and I will be back with you next Thursday. Again, if you have questions, post your questions, or email them, I should say, to my team so that we can answer your questions. You might be the next hot seat that I answer on one of my hot seat Thursdays. All right. So with that said, I'll see y'all next Thursday. Have a phenomenal rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.